Hi, everyone. It's been a real pleasure to be here. It's my first Thinking Digital conference, and it's also my first time in front of an audience such as yourselves. And so I kind of struggled with how I should make this presentation go and what I really want to say, given the chance that I'm up here in front of you. So my my life now project, kind of is trying to determine the value of the individual in a data-driven society. Oh, actually, that was the original one. Determining the value of the individual in a data-driven economy. But when I started looking at this and what values I have compared to what the value of data is to our economy, we're very different. And so first I wanted to kind of go back to determining the values of the individual in our data-driven society. And that's different for all of us. And I think when we lose sight of this, because everything's going so fast and it's so much about what are we selling, how to get yourself out there, self-promotion, company promotion, corporate promotion, that I think our intentions of our actions and the things that we're building and kind of everything that we're doing can become a little bit skewed in terms of what we really need to be doing, like what was said yesterday by Luciano, how do we make a world that works for everybody? So in the summer of 2013, I was in between 2 years of college. I went back to school to the Royal College of Art where this project was born. And I was kind of in a low place, even trying to advance my career. I still couldn't get a job, and I couldn't get even an internship without being a highly technical skilled person. And so I was feeling pretty worthless, and then on top of it, I was going through a painful breakup. And so when this came out, the leaked documents by Snowden, I was really quite interested, and because I was so low, I wasn't thinking so much in fear of privacy and what was going to happen of that. I didn't really care. I was thinking more about the intentions of the manipulation behind what was happening. And I looked at, okay, so there's the intentions of the defense system, and I'm American. And I left America in a way to get away from the values that I didn't agree with. And I did that after September 11th. And now, in a digital age in just 10 years, this whole big industry had actually grown, and that's what interested me more, that there's actually value in the data. So from my low point that I was at, I was like, oh, well, at least I'm worthwhile in some way, or we all are. And so I looked at the industry, and I realized that in 10 years it had grown up to $350 billion, and it's supposed to reach 1 trillion by 2020, 1 trillion pounds. And I guess this shouldn't really come as a surprise. We're also technically loaded. We carry around tracking devices with us in a way, and I saw it as that. And when I started to look closer at who was collecting this information, I saw that everyone is a company, and a very particular company, and many of you actually probably work for those companies. And so I started to look at what these companies were interested in, and they were all the same kind of level. They were corporations. And I started to look at, okay, what is a corporation? And then I went back to school and to start the second year, and we were assigned a brief to design a protest. And I felt like, okay, well, how can I design a protest against something like this? But it's actually something that I feel has been initiated since the industrial age, and so effectively, we're constantly in a revolution. How do I protest against a revolution? And I started looking at how this was playing out on what the World Economic Forum had to say, the OECD, and what this new class, especially given that we're kind of very precarious workforce, as was said, we continually strip ourselves of the work that needs to be done, and what does this mean to have this new commodity, like that I compare with sugar or cotton, that's being produced by masses and then being refined by few and then profited off by very few. So I started to ask, what's a corporation? And the more I dug into it, the more I saw that that the way that they operated, the way that they organized themselves and structured themselves was very convenient. And actually, in the US, a corporation is considered a person with all the same rights and advantages and benefits as natural people, but actually much greater. And so I started to think, well, maybe it's actually better to be a corporation than a person today. And then, coincidentally, I could actually copyright or treat my personal data as intellectual property of the corporation. And I could maybe begin to look at what other kinds of systems could evolve, like if we're all corporations and then we have maybe a cooperative data broker, that we still, what mutually dependent system could possibly occur. But this still bothered me because it's still about exploitation and manipulation. And I wanted to go a bit further back into what the meaning is. So I felt like, I guess if you have to exploit something, at least exploit yourself. Or if you're going to be exploited, at least exploit yourself. If you're going to be a product, at least be your own. And if you're going to be making profit for someone, at least make it for yourself. And so I really got into the history of capitalism and how production is organized, and I figured, okay, well, I have to make that production organized completely around myself and completely down to the individual. So I only use my resources that come from me. This is not the end of the product, but I treat myself as the product, and I am also the owner. And I incorporated, let me play you this video first. We are all data slaves. I don't know about you, but I've had enough of being exploited. You know who's got it made? Corporations. If companies can make money from my information that I generate just by being alive, then so can I. I've decided to play their game, but with a little twist, by bringing the whole process down to the individual by incorporating my identity. What's my solution? Extreme capitalism. I'm now the founder, CEO, shareholder, and product of Jennifer Lyn Morone Inc. As a corporation, who I am, how I am, and what I do is for me to exploit, making my life, my existence, and the data I generate my business. This is not about everybody getting rich, it's about everybody getting their fair share. Let me explain how this works. I've broken down every aspect of how I am as a human into physical, mental, and biological services. Take a look over here. On my website, people can go to ask to use me. Debates to requests are also transparent, so if you ask me to do something dangerous and unethical, you better be prepared to answer why. Shareholders vote on major decisions. Perhaps I'll be used for what I do best. Perhaps it will go terribly wrong. At the same time, I'm capturing and collecting as much data about myself as I possibly can, so I can analyze, package, and sell it as I see fit. I'm using all the same methods of surveillance and data collection that companies and governments do to us now. The only difference is that I'm not interested in your information. I'm only interested in collecting mine. And I'm going to be fully transparent about it all, meaning I'm making it live and public. Why? Because we're that transparent to those watching us now. As I gain control with this exposure, I will become more opaque. I also want to test what's the worst that can happen. If someone steals my identity, I don't stop existing. If everything is happening out in the open, caught on camera, with sensors, every action streamed live, is there still danger? Well, you'll have to watch to find out. This is extreme capitalism. So it's a very critical project, but it's also kind of trying to test out new waters, and also it's just a big mix of what we don't know, the technologies involved now, and also very much about human experience and human nature, actually. How far do we go when there's maybe money at one end, or how does greed change us, or empathy, the things that we've talked about. So the main thing that this really changed for me was that I had to I had to think completely differently than I do as a normal person. I had to think like a corporation, and as a corporation, you do not think about what is good for you. You think about what is needed for everybody else. What can I do differently? How can I do it better? How can I be better? And another thing is that you have to think about maximizing your output and minimizing your input. And this is not how we think as individuals. We do not think about, let me consume less, let me do more. And that was a major change. And I had to define basically what I wanted to stand for, what I wanted to be, what I wanted my identity to represent, and how I was going to go about doing that. So as a kind of exercise, a human exercise, it was quite interesting. And then I had to figure out, okay, well, how much has my kind of production cost so far? How much has been invested to make me? And these are just basic values. They're not about they're not trying to put a price to the experience. They're just what has been spent so far according to my life. And it's a bit of a shock when you realize, oh, actually my life cost $1 million at least. And what have I done to show for that? And then also kind of counting up my assets. As a person, I don't have any land or any machinery, but I have my body. And these are things like a company would say, okay, these are our long-term assets, the things we won't sell. We're not trying to, it's not inventory, but that in case we need to go under the life of the company, once that's over, you can always liquidate. And I incorporated in Delaware, like all major corporations, Google, Facebook, all of them, because they're very favorable corporate laws and tax reasons. But also it's one of the few states that you can serve, one person can be all three roles. So I'm the director, the secretary, and the treasurer, and this kind of multiplicity of roles gets interesting. And then when you incorporate, you also get immediately your own financial instrument. So that's a way to raise capital. I didn't know anything about this before, so trying to sort out like how much should a share cost and what are the taxes going to be and how much, and it's not logical. So you get a piece of paper and you say, that's worth that much. Are you going to give it to me? And that's it. And you say how much you need to raise. And it's also not something based on when you're starting out, it's not based on what you're really worth or how much has been invested. It's based on your potential. And it's kind of a very different thing of earning a wage compared to starting with this, and then you have to make it worth something and valuable. And then the other side of kind of getting back to ownership of data is that we forfeit our rights every day, many times, and we've been doing this for a while. And now that I have to try and turn that table around, I have my own set of terms and conditions, and then in a way I become the data rights owner and anybody else becomes the data user. And then all the ways that I need to try and collect the information. So I'm not, like I said, I don't come from a tech background. So I had to look at what I was interacting with and how I could collect it and what I could collect. And then I also wanted to have physical biosensor information, so that I could figure out the value of my interactions, the things I do, how I do them, and how they relate to how I feel about doing them. So I built this really not comfortable, not practical, and not pretty device, but it has EEG, EDA, EMG, a little camera for life logging, and light sensor, and accelerometer for clumsiness. And it's not very easy to unravel all the time. If you hate your headphones, you would hate this. And then I also wanted to kind of work on the surveillance aspect as well, to really understand the behavioral values of my life and how things are. And also that there's we're going as a society, or young people are living more online, and they're commoditizing this. They're turning themselves into a product already, so I wanted to reflect that. So this was an installation in London in November, and we just did a recreation of the room, so that was how everything was set up, and a very simple, running my PC as a server. And then that's how it actually looked. And then this is a bit getting into the very simple diagram of the software. And it's just trying to redirect the flow of information to be in my control, my possession. Maybe not my control, because I know there's always a version that goes out there, but at least I'm collecting it as well, and I kind of build up this filing cabinet, and maybe I could see how much data a person actually generates in a lifetime. And then the frequency factor, how often does it need to be collected, and from where, and what. And then to try and pull all these things together, and which is actually looks kind of like it would be possible in this sketch, but it's not. It doesn't come out that nice, and this is supposed to be like a continually live streaming window of what's happening, and that you'd have, okay, what's happening here, and then how does that seem to affect my mood, and then also things, self-serving ads in a way. And then these are other iterations of trying to combine all these images and texts, and it's not an easy thing. And this is a more recent one. And this is starting to look at more just the metadata and the content, which is the way government especially collects the information. And it's supposed to, you go into some parts, and this is where I haven't yet gotten to, but at what points do you say, okay, you can only go that far, and then you have to pay or subscribe or try and play with like who is the information valuable to? And of course, this is just a small collection of some things. And then I had an itemized list that I was starting to put out there, but actually value comes in the combination of information. So this is recent menu that's been made up, and then the cards to go along with it. And it's 12 months for some of them, and then some are just standard, like identity doesn't change over 12 months that much. And that was the exhibition space. So it was also kind of confronting what's for sale. Is it an art project? Is it a business? And it, I think, can be a bit confusing. And so there's a whole other part of the project that I really can't get into. I don't have the time, but that's just the data part. And then the other side is how can I kind of serve to a local economy? And like we heard yesterday, these online middlemen services that connect people with other people that need to get things done. And so that kind of moves a bit more in that direction of how can you be of use? What other ways can you start thinking of exchange? Can you maybe think about profit in different ways? And then another thing is that we are not thinking about our social welfare, I think, enough. I come from the US, as I said, and these are the goals. These are the goals. It's been these goals for a long time, and a lot of the technological progression that you're all working very, very hard on and very well are for these goals. But is that what really suits us, and is that leading us to a good place as a society, or for the future of our children, or for kind of where we want to go? Because it's not benefiting everybody. Even if it sounds like it might be, it's not. And we could see, since the internet, these major jumps. So I'd like you to think about who you're really building your things for. And Luciano yesterday said, think deeply, create better, I think that's what he said, and be mindful. And I'd like to ask you to be mindful of who you're exploiting, and think deeply about who it's really benefiting. And then if it's not good enough for you according to your values, please design again. Thank you.